Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and formations of the Warhammer 40K universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And today, we shall be taking a look at one of the oft-forgotten forces that is the true backbone of the Imperium's military might. Of course, I can only be speaking of the fighter wings of the Imperial Navy. Now, the format of this video will be simple, yet unusual, I am told. First, there will be a little self-written tale to truly show, not just tell, how the forces act and what they come up against. An immersive experience to get you closer to the grim darkness. Then, I shall do a breakdown of the details involved in the topic we are addressing today. So, let us proceed. Defiance. This is going to be fun. I know I should not put it that way, that men and women will die, that I may well end up being one of them, but this is what we do. This is what I was born to do. We fight, and we win. Why? Because we are human. Because we are the Emperor's own navy. Damn the whiny melancholy of the ground pounders. Damn the fanatics who throw themselves into the grinder. We aren't like them in any way. Well, apart from the fact we're all humans, of course. And thus, followers of the God Emperor. And now, we are about to bring his own wrath down on the Xenos scum. It had been 3 weeks since we found one of our worlds annihilated by nuclear weaponry. That's what the tech priest called it. The surface of Ignatius V was a burning hellscape, even when we arrived. And that must have been at least days after the attack. We hunted, of course, trying to find the vile horrors who had performed this butchery of a helpless agri-world. And we all knew who had done it. Rakghoul scum. Oh, they were dangerous enough to planets and ground pounders, but their ships were junk. Despite this, they still had teeth, and that is where we came in. For the Rakghoul ships were nothing but a huge central line weapon with scrap around it. They had some turrets, howler cannons, roarer beams, both of which could pose a threat to a ship of the line, but it was the clanger torpedo tubes that were their main threat to our base ship. The Rakghoul were nasty in close quarters. If they got onto the Promethean Wrath, well, there would be serious issues. The main weapons would be a threat to our home, our base ship, the Promethean Wrath, but not to us. So we saddled up, and we got the order, and off we went. A full flight of over 400 fighters sent out to face them. The great amount were Furies, of course. A quarter with a real power in the force. We Starhawks. Multiple flights of Furies were hanging back, providing an escort to our capital ship, just in case this was a trap. But it was not. We could all sense it. This was time for some retribution. Because they had come out of nowhere again and again over the last few years, appearing, smashing planets and populations, then heading off again just as quickly, and we had to peruse their handiwork again and again. Finally we had them in our sights. I looked to my crew, watching for their temper, their center. Their heads are down, their concentration undivided, their urge as great as my own. A full dozen men under my command. I see chevrons across the data screens. We are advancing in a pincer action, as instructed, broken into segments as the thing turns around to meet us. They cannot escape. They know they cannot run. So, like a wounded animal, they turn to fight. If we fail, they will plough through space towards a Promethean Wrath and try to get their central cannon firing on our home. We cannot let this happen. As we get closer, I want to retch. Just the sight of its alien fins and decks brings out something instinctive in me. Pure, unadulterated hatred. It's a Butcher-class vessel, you see. This is most likely the very ship that nuked that agri world into oblivion. And I am going to enjoy this. A murmur becomes a psalm as the lads begin to bellow out the hymns of retribution. I can feel my fingers itching to lock and then order the gunners to rip this thing to pieces. Patience. We must get closer. And then it happens. Long cylinders fly out from the Butcher's ship and slam towards us. But we know we aren't the target of the attack. They don't have the precision for that. Comms buzz, and the expected statement comes through. The interceptors, the Furies, burst forward and twist in space to follow the cylinders. They open up with their las cannons, getting as close to the boarding pods as possible, but they are tough, and concentrated fire is the only thing that would take them out. So, we are stripped of our Guardian Fighter Wing escorts. Now, if this had been an Eldar Corsair wing, or traitors or renegades, there is no way we would have carried forward without them. We would be so much Grox fodder against nippy interceptors. But these are Rakgol. They don't have the fighters to take us out. I cannot split my attention. I assume the Furies will be successful. I assume we will have somewhere to return to when this is done. I concentrate all of my attention on the main ship. As we hit a certain range, the fire starts coming out from it. Turrets track in our direction, and a wave of flak fire comes bursting out at us. Lines of energy flash through the void, but few connect. Their targeting is so rudimentary, this is almost a joke. Almost too easy. Then, I hold that thought, as they turn a fraction towards us and fire their main cannon. An explosion of power comes from them and carves into the night. Like a mad Ogryn, they flail out without accuracy or control. But the strength is there. I see wings 2 through 8 evaporate. Alas, I will mourn them. But only when the deed is done. Another blast comes out from that central column, but we have scattered. Only 2 Starhawks are taken this time. One of them was zigging when it should have been zagging. And I understand. The Rakgol know that they will not take many of us with this mad shooting from their main guns, but it puts people off their concentration on the defensive waves of turret fire. Clever for Xenos scum. The order is given, and as one, over 50 Hawks unleash our payload of missiles. We join them, of course. The enemy's flak take out some, but not enough, and plumes of multicolored fire erupt all across the Butcher's hull. But this is only the starting course of our banquet of vengeance. Timing will be the crux point here. I can only hope the rest can control themselves. I know I will find it difficult. I feel the Emperor's own rage coursing through my veins. I flick a look at my gunners. They are attentive, but also watchful. They see me whip my gaze across them. They know. None will fire until I have given the word, or they will have a very cold time outside as we return home and they float about to consider their decisions before their air runs out. I run a tight ship. They all know that. We head in closer and scorch the ship with our las cannons blazing. This is superficial damage at best, but it feels good, and it is a distraction unto itself. I have to control myself as I bite back a curse as some of the new recruits of other Starhawks panic and had fly too early. If we time this wrong, this thing will blow up in our faces. But the untried and untested who discharge their payload are the minority. More of our number crash and burn as we penetrate the optimal range of their flak screens. But most of the hit are just tipped and gain the glory of battle damage. I personally despise the repainting it requires, but I feel their joy. To be shot but not destroyed, to walk through the fires and be touched but not consumed. I keep our heading erratic and our speed up. We will not be hit thus. And then it is time. That moment that means life or death. We are moving directly along its hull, close, very. I wait, I hold. We fly, I hold. Then, as we fly over its midship and threaten to pass it still filled, I dump out our cargo. Plasma bombs rain down on its arse section and engines, and we dash for distance, followed by all of the others who've done exactly as we have. In our rear view, we can see the rents and plumes of fire seem to connect over the entire ship like lava dropped in spiderweb patterns. And then it becomes a star of light and radiation as the butcher ship explodes. And while the litanies of victory are screamed out from every throat here, I nod in satisfaction. This is how we will do it. This is how we will hold on. Battle by battle, system by system, war by war. We will never surrender. We may suffer defeats, but we will never be defeated, because we are human, and this galaxy is ours. Ah, the Navy. A thing that is not often given its due. This is logical, of course, as the vast majority of games are set on the ground, in the trenches of sieges, the streets of smashed cities, or inside the zones mortalis or boarding actions. All involve our wee men charging around the place, exterminating their enemies with great prejudice. And no small amount of loss, one would hope, for it is all supposed to be fun. Yet, in the lore, in the reality that our soldiers exist within, the power of the Navy cannot be ignored. Not only do they have more personnel than most wings of the military, but they truly are the first line of defense and the last hope for humanity. For what point would be the crushing power of the Astra Militarum or the Adepta of the Sororitas without the ability to get to the worlds under siege, the worlds they are to conquer? And few planets are able to defend themselves from a naval blockade and the subsequent orbital bombardment. Few indeed. For they would need to be self-sufficient in not only food production, but also in arms production, if they were to ever hope to repulse a concerted assault. Shells and ordnance require production, and this is no small task with the technological degeneration in the Imperium of mankind. They would also, of course, require to have massive overlapping void shield arrays and massed batteries of firepower of their own to punish the belligerent forces attacking them. The Navy fights off armies, hordes, and migrations before ever the population of the Imperium are even aware of it. The Navy culls more enemies than the entire Astra Militarum and Astartes combined. And should they fail, should the Navy be wiped out, then all of the bolters, power armor, tanks, troops, and landing craft would mean just about squat. Zip, zero, nada. Without the Navy, all is lost. Now with that hearty throat clearing has been done, and we realize the true import of the senior service, as they are called in Blighty, let us get on to the meat of the event. The fighter wings of the Imperium. Now many will immediately think of single-man craft that have all got wise-cracking hotshot pilots with names like Apollo or Starbuck, Wedge Antilles or Luke Skywalker, dancing between capital ships and able to seriously injure said behemoths of the void with strategic fire, lucky shots, or even a ramming action. But please, dispel this image from your mind, for the grim darkness of the far future is not Star Wars, Trek, or Battlestar Galactica. Not by quite some margin. For the capital vessels of the Navy, the ships of the line, dwarf their contemporaries in any other setting. Not that bigger makes better, but one must recall the differences in scale. is my point. The brave but stupid suicide run that leaves such devastation in other settings would be the equivalent of a fly hitting a Sherman tank or an aircraft carrier. Pathetic. And of zero use 99.99% recurring of the time. The fighters in Warhammer are not single-pilot, throwaway vessels. The majority of them are far more akin to a flying fortress of World War II format, with multiple crew, many banks of weapons, and even cabins for sleeping or defecating. These are far more akin to a Star Trek runabout or other shuttle, and this is the true difference in the settings. The fighters of the Imperium have a very narrow role, and vast majority of the time are never considered to be even a mainstay of the offensive output of an Imperial ship. The use of regional control ships or aircraft carrier equivalents is a known quantity in the Imperium, but it is far less important than a commensurate ship class in near any other setting, for they are simply not that useful unless they are fighting against lower-tech adversaries, be they raiders, xenos, or traitors, who think a bit too highly of themselves and have then broken away from the true path of the Imperium. And the naval fighters are broken into two very distinctive groups. Those of the Void, who we will be dealing with today, who are homed and used in deep space by carriers. Then there are the atmospheric craft of the Aeronautica Imperialis, which we shall deal with at another point. Now originally, during the time of the Great Crusade, many of the Solar Auxilia and the militia might have had attached fighter wings, as most forces were self-contained and could thus operate independently. But the Horus Heresy changed everything, and I do mean everything. Rabute Gilliman, the avenging son and primarch of the Ultramarines, wrote his codex for the Astartes, the Space Marines, but he also wrote tracts for every wing of the Imperium's war machine. And these tracts were designed to do two things. The first was to be a repository for every known tactic, doctrine, and approach to modern war. The second was that it was designed to break apart the wings of the military. In this way, no one individual would be able to take control of enough forces to ever try to perform a civil war or coup ever again. The Navy was separated from the ground-bound military. Regiments of Imperial Guard were most often forced to be specialized and never able to have mixed arms forces, all designed to make sure no one set of officers could be corrupted, then wage an effective war. But the oddity in this situation is that the Aeronautica are separated from the Guard. Thus, atmospheric fighters are still wholly within the purview and command of the Navy. Odd, as they would only be useful in planetary defense or assault, but that is not how it was arranged. Hence, an officer of the fighter wings would always have a naval rank, despite it being stationed on a world where ships of the line had not even visited for centuries. And in this situation, it would not matter the rank of the planetary viceroy, governor, or any of the Astra Militarum officers present on said world. They would always have to request the services of the fighter wings, never demand them, because they could simply be ignored. Now it would take a very brave or very stupid officer of the fighter wings to thumb their nose or flip the bird at the regional potentate, but it is within their right nonetheless. Now, let us get into the Void Craft, for this is where the fun begins. Now, as it is what I am known for, I shall quote an extract of existing lore before explaining further. So, as usual, to quote. The Fury. The Fury Interceptor is the most common type of starfighter used by the Imperial Navy, the Adeptus Astartes, and the Imperium as a whole for void combat. The Fury is designated as an attack craft by the Imperial Navy. The Fury is carried in their thousands by several different types of Imperial Navy battleships and grand cruisers and other attack carriers. Each fighter wing is comprised of roughly 15 to 20 Fury interceptors, with each squadron varying in size from 3 fighters to 5 fighters. The Fury Interceptor was first developed by the ancient Mechanicum during the last years of the Emperor's Great Crusade in the late 30th millennium. The craft was designed to replace the aging Wrath-pattern starfighter that was most widely used by the Imperium at that time. The Fury was easier to produce, handled more smoothly for its pilots, and suffered from less technical malfunctions. However, the more veteran pilots in the Armada Imperialis fleet still preferred the Wrath, seeing it as a finer instrument of void war over the much more sterile Fury. By the time of the Horus Heresy, the Fury had become the more common Imperial starfighter in the Imperial fleet. The Fury is still used in small numbers by the forces of Chaos in the late 41st millennium, usually located on starships that have been captured or stolen by the Chaos fleets or by defectors that have brought their fighters with them. But the Fury has mostly been replaced in Chaos warfleets by the Swift Death fighter, and for a large number of centuries, the Swift Death was a nemesis of the Fury in void combat, as the Swift Death was faster and more maneuverable, though the Fury was more resilient in the face of damage and better armed. The Fury Interceptor is a workhorse of the Imperial Navy and can be used in multiple roles throughout a single fleet. The Fury is most commonly used as either a void superiority fighter or an interdiction attack craft that shoots down enemy torpedoes and bombers that threaten larger starships. The Fury is also used to escort the Imperial Navy's Starhawk bombers during their own attack runs on the enemy's capital ships. Furies can return to their mothership or another Imperial carrier if need be, to be rearmed and repaired, although if a Fury is too heavily damaged, another can be issued if the pilot and his crew are needed in the battle. When not in combat, Furies are used for scouting and reconnaissance, and simple combat air patrol missions around a fleet. The Fury Interceptor, along with the Starhawk bomber, is fully capable of attacking planetary targets within an atmosphere, although, due to their sheer size and obvious specialization for void combat, their effectiveness varies dependent on their target and how well it is protected. Like most Imperial vehicles and void craft, there exist several different patterns, marks and variants of the Fury Interceptor, with the largest of them reaching up to 60 or 70 meters in length, and the smallest being closer to 40 meters. The Fury's size is such that a wing of 20 Furies takes up the same amount of space aboard a starship as a wing of 40 of the Adeptus Astartes Thunderhawk gunships. Due to a lack of an atmosphere in the void and the myriad other problems that plague atmospheric flight, the Fury is far more maneuverable, despite its size, when compared to an aircraft designed for atmospheric operations. The Fury is identifiable by its aerodynamic fighter hull and swept forward wings. The outer hull features an armoured, transparent canopy for the pilot and another for the gunner. Some Fury patterns are equipped with void shields that are capable of being redirected to reinforce individual facings against incoming enemy fire. The spacecraft is able to be fitted with an extra centerline-mounted fuel tank for extended patrols on long-range missions. The spacecraft is propelled by either a single, large fusion plasma thruster engine or by two smaller engines, each capable of generating up to 60,000 tons of thrust. The Fury is outfitted with several altitude jets to control its movements in zero gravity. Each Fury is crewed by at least two crewmen, the pilot and the gunnery officer, but a fully crewed Fury requires a 4-man crew, adding a navigator and a secondary gunner. On occasions, an astropath will also be aboard to provide greater communications capability, although I am not sure that this is still relevant. This is exceptionally old lore. The size of the crew is dictated by the mission parameters set each time a squadron is launched into the void. Small-scale missions such as fleet patrol and short-range interdiction only require the pilot and a gunner to be present, while long-range reconnaissance and interceptions require larger crews. The craft is also capable of having at least a partial crew made up of servitors. The Fury's reinforced hull contains an extensive network of circuitry and life support systems, including a small chemical toilet and a sleeping compartment for the crew, allowing for the craft to stay away from its mothership for longer periods of time. Each crew member aboard a Fury is highly trained, usually undergoing many Terran years of harsh training to prepare them for the extremes of piloting a Fury in void combat. All crew members aboard a Fury are required to wear suspensor wire pressurized suits to ensure that their blood does not pool in zero gravity, since the fighter does not possess artificial gravity, and to help counteract with the horrendous forces of rapid acceleration and extreme G-forces encountered during high-speed void combat. The pressure suits pump super-oxygenated blood directly into the body via spinal connectors, and their contoured helmets exert outwards pressure on the surrounding air to prevent the crewmen from blacking out. A Fury can be easily torn apart by the intense gravitational forces experienced by mishandling the craft, or by losing control of a damaged craft in combat. A Fury interceptor crewed by Space Marines probably has these systems removed, as the Astartes' power armor and genetically enhanced physique would provide the same, if not better, protection. The Fury interceptor is heavily armed for a craft of its size, and due to its number of patterns and variants, the fighters have several known weapons loadouts. All known patterns of the Fury can be armed with up to 2 wing-mounted racks of carrying a variable amount of high-explosive anti-starship missiles. The craft is also usually armed with several banks of forward-facing las cannons, each mounted on the starship's hull or on its wings. There are existing variants of the Fury with a nose-mounted turret that can be armed with either las cannons or multi-lasers. It is also unknown what other types of weapons can be used by different patterns of the Fury, or how many various marks and patterns of the Fury may actually exist amongst the scattered battle fleets of the Imperial Navy. The Starhawk. The Starhawk, also known as the Calixis pattern Starhawk bomber, is a non-atmospheric Imperial Navy bomber. Starhawk bombers are larger, slower void craft than the Marauder bomber, which is capable of operating in both vacuum and an atmosphere, and was the previous primary bomber in use by Imperial forces. A Starhawk is designed to carry a heavy payload of plasma bombs and armored-piercing missiles for use solely against enemy capital ships rather than planetary targets. The Calixis pattern has forward racks for up to 10 large anti-ship missiles with powerful crack warheads, and mid-bays containing multiple bomb-firing cylinders. Starhawks launch volleys of missiles at precise targets on an enemy's warship. They enclose and make bombing runs on the hull, pumping out flurries of plasma warheads. Crews of 10 to 15 man these weapons, as well as less potent armaments designed for defense against starfighters and incoming missiles. Like the Fury interceptor that often accompanies it, the Starhawk has cramped living quarters that allow these spacecraft to be used for extended assignments. A standard Starhawk features limited sleeping quarters, chemical toilets, and even an automated medical unit inside its hull. Armed with a multitude of short-range turret-mounted defense weapons like las cannons that are used to fend off enemy starships, a lone Starhawk can wreak great havoc amongst enemy fighter squadrons before swooping in to deliver a crippling missile strike on an enemy capital ship. On rare occasions, Starhawks can be modified to carry and launch a very small number of anti-void ship torpedoes. Starhawk bombers are typically organized into squadrons of 10 craft. The Shark Assault Boat. The Shark Assault Boat, also known as the Lathe Pattern Shark Assault Boat, is the Imperial Navy's standard assault craft for carrying out ship-to-ship boarding operations. Typically about 55 meters in length, these Shark-class assault boats are designed to deliver troops through a void ship's defenses directly into combat. The Shark Assault Boat consists primarily of a large plasma drive and an armed troop compartment that is studded with magnetic clamps and melter charges. When the Shark reaches an enemy ship, the clamps latch on to the enemy hull as the charges, in concert with las breachers, blast a hole through which assault troops can storm the vessel. Much like a torpedo, their cargo is their weapon. Consequently, virtually all patterns of the Shark carry only defensive weapons, with every cubic meter of space dedicated to engines, armor, or troop carrying. and these boats are never seen on anything smaller than a battleship-sized carrier vessel, and even then, only at significant cost. Tactically, assault boats are often accompanied by fighters to aid these crafts in overcoming an enemy vessel's defenses. To better enable this tactic, assault boats will usually have engines that are near capable of matching a starfighter's acceleration. However, they seldom handle as well. End quote. Of course, there are a plethora of other variants, and one must always remember that the Imperium is gargantuan. Regions will have their own patterns and loadouts for these vessels for a plethora of reasons. Some might face only one type of enemy the most, like orcs, etc., and use loadouts that are best matched against the flyboys of the greenskins. Some might be in a region where they are unable to maintain some of the more advanced weaponry, and one might find proxies or replacements of the kind that are made by the local forge worlds. But, by the same token, there will be rare regions where tech that is all but legendary in the rest of the Imperium will be available due to the maintenance of the local forge world. Much is made of the regimentation and harmonization of the military wings of the Imperium, but the reality is that the galaxy is far larger and stranger than the present lore denotes. With so much emphasis being laid at the feet of the returning Primarchs and the spotlight being placed on the most central of regions, one can be fooled into thinking that the scope and sprawl of the setting is rather homogenized, and this is simply not the case, and I prefer to look at it all from the old perspective. You really can see so much out there. The Imperium is so dispersed and deranged that near anything can happen, and there are still so many worlds that the Imperium has not even investigated, let alone catalogued and conquered. So do try to release yourself from the shackles you feel are placed on you by the official lore. It really is the world you wish it to be, if only you have the creativity to set up your own sectors, regions, and tantamount to your own bespoke setting. It's your hobby, so do whatever you like with it. And we will get to the Aeronautica Imperialis another time, and I hope to see you then. So do like and subscribe and turn on that notification button if you want more of the same. And of course, check out links in our description. Thank you for your precious time. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.